Welcome to Lesson 2.3, Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation. This is one of the most important lessons in your care partner orientation. Agnes and Sandy's Caring Hands has zero tolerance for abuse, neglect, exploitation, mistreatment, intimidation, or retaliation against the people we serve. As a care partner, you may spend more time with a client than many other people in that client's life. Because of that, you may be one of the first people to notice that something is wrong. You must know how to recognize warning signs, what actions are prohibited, how to respond when someone tells you they are being mistreated, and when concerns must be reported. Before we go any further, remember this: you are not the investigator. You do not need photographs, witnesses, a confession, or absolute proof before raising a legitimate concern. Your responsibility is to recognize warning signs, protect the client from immediate danger within your role, report concerns through the required channels, and accurately document what you observed. Investigating whether abuse actually occurred belongs to the proper authorities and agency leadership. Never delay a required report because you're trying to solve the case yourself. Georgia's Adult Protective Services guidance specifically speaks in terms of suspected abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and instructs mandated reporters to report when they have reasonable cause to believe an at-risk adult has been abused, neglected, or exploited. Many of the clients served in home care may be especially vulnerable to mistreatment. Age, disability, cognitive impairment, dependence on another person, isolation, or difficulty communicating can make it harder for someone to protect themselves or report what is happening. Georgia Adult Protective Services investigates allegations involving older persons age 65 and older and adults age 18 or older with disabilities who reside in community settings rather than long-term care facilities. Never assume that someone cannot be abused simply because they live with family members or because their caregiver appears loving. Abuse doesn't always mean hitting. Mistreatment may be physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, financial, or involve neglect. You may also encounter self-neglect, where an individual is unable or unwilling to meet essential personal needs. We're going to discuss each one separately. Physical abuse involves the use of physical force that causes harm or places someone at risk of harm. This can include hitting, pushing, slapping, pinching, kicking, burning, rough handling, or improperly restraining someone. Physical abuse doesn't become acceptable because a client has dementia, is combative, or refuses care. A frustrated caregiver cannot grab, shove, strike, or intentionally hurt a client. Georgia DHS also identifies rough handling, improper restraints, intentional injuries, and forcing someone to remain in a bed, chair, or room among potential indicators of physical abuse. Injuries don't automatically mean abuse occurred. Older adults may bruise easily. Clients may fall. Medical conditions can cause skin changes. What matters is recognizing situations that don't make sense. For example, you may notice several bruises in unusual areas or hear different explanations about how an injury occurred. You might notice the client becoming fearful whenever a particular person enters the room. Don't immediately accuse anyone. Observe carefully and report legitimate concerns. Emotional abuse can cause significant harm even though there may be no visible injury. Yelling, threatening, humiliating, insulting, intimidating, or deliberately isolating a vulnerable person may constitute emotional abuse. Statements like, "If you don't cooperate, I'll leave you here. Nobody wants to deal with you." Or, "I'll put you in a nursing home if you don't behave," may be emotionally abusive. Georgia DHS identifies threats, harassment, intimidation, isolation, and insults as examples of emotional abuse. Caregiving can sometimes be difficult. A client may repeat the same question dozens of times. Someone with dementia may yell, resist care, or become confused. A client may refuse something you're trying to help them with. None of those situations give you permission to become abusive. If you're becoming frustrated to the point where you cannot provide safe and respectful care, step back when it is safe to do so and contact your supervisor. Asking for assistance is always better than allowing frustration to turn into mistreatment. Sexual abuse includes sexual behavior directed toward a vulnerable adult without valid consent. It can be committed by a stranger, family member, spouse, partner, caregiver, or another trusted person. Georgia DHS specifically recognizes sexual behavior toward an at-risk adult without the person's full knowledge and consent as sexual abuse. Care partners must also maintain strict professional boundaries. Sexual relationships or sexual behavior involving clients are inappropriate and can involve serious ethical, employment, and legal consequences. Some warning signs may include unexplained injuries, torn clothing, sudden emotional changes, fear of another person, or a client's own statements. Once again, your responsibility isn't to determine whether an assault occurred. If something raises a reasonable concern, report it according to required procedures. Neglect occurs when necessary care or essential services aren't provided to the point that the person is harmed or placed at risk of harm. Georgia DHS gives examples involving food, water, shelter, medical care, and other essential services. Neglect may be intentional, but it can also happen when a caregiver doesn't understand the person's needs or cannot adequately provide the necessary care. Neglect isn't something that only happens in other households. A professional caregiver can neglect a client. For example, if a client's service plan requires supervision because they are a significant fall or wandering risk, leaving that client unattended can create an extremely dangerous situation. Sleeping while you're responsible for active supervision may also constitute serious misconduct. Ignoring toileting needs, intentionally refusing assistance, abandoning your assignment, or failing to respond to an emergency can put a client at risk. Follow the client's service plan and agency procedures at all times. This deserves special emphasis. Never leave a client unattended when their service plan or condition requires supervision. That includes public places. You should not leave a vulnerable client alone in a restaurant, store, park, parking lot, or vehicle because you need to run an errand or use the restroom. Plan ahead and maintain appropriate supervision. A few minutes can be enough time for someone to wander away, fall, suffer a medical emergency, or become injured. This reinforces the agency's existing client safety expectations for care partners. Self-neglect is somewhat different. In self-neglect, the concern isn't necessarily that another person is abusing the client. The individual may be unable to adequately care for their own needs. Georgia DHS describes self-neglect as failing to perform essential self-care or being unable to handle day-to-day needs because of medical, mental health, or other disabilities. DHS also notes that self-neglect itself is not a crime. As a care partner, significant self-neglect concerns still need to be reported through proper channels. Financial exploitation occurs when someone improperly or illegally uses another person's money, property, or resources for their own benefit. Georgia DHS identifies examples such as misusing power of attorney, undue influence, false representation, or improperly gaining access to an adult's income or assets. Older and disabled adults can be targeted because they may depend heavily on other people. As a care partner, maintain a very clear financial boundary. Never borrow money from a client. Never ask for a loan. Never use their credit or debit cards for yourself. Never ask to be included in a will. Never persuade the client to change a beneficiary. Never pressure them to give you property. And never take money simply because you believe they won't miss it. If your assigned duties involve making purchases for a client, follow agency procedures and maintain all required receipts and documentation. Financial abuse can be difficult to see. You may notice unpaid utility bills even though the client normally has sufficient resources. Personal belongings may begin disappearing. A new acquaintance may suddenly control the client's money. Or the client may tell you someone is taking their checks. Don't investigate their finances yourself. Report the concern. Never dismiss a concern because the person involved is the client's family member. Abuse and exploitation can occur within families. It can also involve caregivers, friends, neighbors, partners, or professionals. Our responsibility is not to protect someone's reputation. Our responsibility is to protect vulnerable clients and follow reporting requirements. Imagine a client quietly tells you, "My son hits me when he gets angry." First, remain calm. Listen. Don't say, "Are you sure?" Don't blame them. Don't interrogate them with dozens of questions. Don't promise, "I won't tell anybody." You may have a legal and professional obligation to report what you've been told, and don't confront the alleged abuser yourself. Confrontation could place the client or you in greater danger. Respond supportively. You might say, "Thank you for telling me. I'm sorry you're experiencing this. I'm concerned about your safety. And I need to report this so that the appropriate people can help." Avoid making promises about what will happen next. If the client is in immediate danger or needs emergency medical assistance, call 911. Adult Protective Services is not an emergency response service. Georgia DHS specifically directs people to call 911 when someone is in immediate danger. After addressing the immediate emergency, notify your supervisor or administrator and follow all agency reporting and incident procedures. Georgia law has mandatory reporting requirements for designated professionals who have reasonable cause to believe that a disabled adult or elder person in the community has been abused, neglected, or exploited. Georgia DHS currently instructs mandated reporters that suspected abuse must be reported to both Adult Protective Services and the appropriate law enforcement agency. Reporting suspected abuse internally to Agnes and Sandy's caring hands is extremely important, but employees must also follow any external reporting obligations that apply to them. Never assume that telling a coworker is enough. For older adults or adults with disabilities living in their own homes or other community settings, Georgia Adult Protective Services can be reached at 1-866-655-24464. Press option 3. Georgia also offers online reporting through the Division of Aging Services. Remember, online reporting is not a substitute for 911 when someone is in immediate danger. Current reporting information should always be verified because agency contact procedures can change. In addition to required reports to outside authorities, immediately notify the appropriate supervisor or administrator at Agnes and Sandy's caring hands. The agency needs to take appropriate steps to protect the client, address staffing or safety concerns, preserve relevant information, and comply with regulatory obligations. Do not simply write the information in your daily care note and assume someone will eventually see it. Serious concerns require direct and immediate communication. Loyalty to a coworker never comes before client safety. If you witness another care partner mistreating a client, don't participate, don't laugh, don't cover for them, and don't agree to keep it secret. Report the concern. The same rules apply whether the suspected individual is a stranger, family member, supervisor, coworker, or someone you personally like. No client or employee should be retaliated against for raising a legitimate concern, making a report, or cooperating with an investigation. Protecting people who speak up is essential to creating a safe organization. Documentation should be factual and objective. Don't diagnose abuse in your notes unless instructed to document an established finding. Instead, document what you actually observed. For example, observed approximately 2-inch purple discoloration on client's left forearm. Then, client stated, "My son grabbed me last night." That's much stronger documentation than writing. Client was abused. Record direct statements accurately when important. Never alter or destroy information related to a suspected incident. Don't change documentation to make the agency or another employee look better. Don't coach someone on what to say. Don't ask a client to take back an allegation. Document truthfully and allow the proper process to occur. You do not need to accuse anyone. Observe the client. Assess whether there is an immediate emergency within the limits of your role. Document objective observations. Notify the appropriate agency supervisor immediately. And follow applicable mandatory reporting requirements. This is not something you wait until next week's staff meeting to mention. Protect the client from immediate danger if you can safely do so. If there is an emergency or immediate threat, contact 911. Report the incident immediately through the appropriate external and agency channels. Document exactly what you witnessed. This may raise concerns involving neglect, exploitation, or both. Don't confront the daughter and begin your own investigation. Report what you observed or learned through the required channels. Don't promise secrecy. Thank the client for telling you. Obtain only the information reasonably necessary to understand the immediate concern. Report the allegation. Financial exploitation can be just as serious as physical mistreatment. This is one of the most important scenarios in the lesson. Don't think, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. A report is not a conviction. Reporting allows the appropriate people to determine what happened. When the legal standard for reporting is met, uncertainty is not a reason to stay silent. Your responsibility is to report the concern, not prove the case. Remember these 4 words: recognize, protect, report, document, recognize warning signs, protect the client from immediate danger within your role, report concerns immediately through the required channels, and document objectively and accurately. Never investigate on your own, never hide a concern, and never retaliate against someone who speaks up. Every person served by Agnes and Sandy's caring hands deserves to feel safe in their own home. Never assume abuse is someone else's problem. The observation you make or the report you submit may protect someone from serious harm. When something appears wrong, take it seriously. Recognize, protect, report, and document. And when you are uncertain about an agency procedure, immediately contact your supervisor or administrator for guidance.